Today's quick chat is with Reverend Daniel Ogle, an associate pastor at Peachtree Road United Methodist Church and the planner of a new church community in Atlanta called the Westside Table. The COVID-19 pandemic interrupted Daniel's community building activities, so today's chat is how his team is addressing the challenges and opportunities of building relationships with people online. What I've asked Daniel to share with us is, what's that experience like building a community, launching a community on purely online without that kind of physical connection? So Daniel, share your experience so far.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on, Mark. It's good to be with you. I just think it's a great example of, like, you can have your plans and you have to pivot. We're all pivoting. We all had visions or ideas about how we were going to execute ministry in 2020. Even if you're in the most traditional, this is kind of what we do every year, like, it's the same. Like, what you were going to do has changed because circumstances of people's lives have changed. And so for us, when it became apparent that we weren't going to be able to gather in person for a while, we really started with the question of, like, what do our people need? We had been meeting people, connecting with people, building relationships, establishing relationships. So we have and had a fair number of folks that were connected with us, that were tied in, that we were touching base with every week with kind of our email list. And so we began with the question of, like, in this season, into this moment, what do people really need? And part of what we've seen is that evolve. Our anchor in this season has just been a Sunday night gathering. And so we've been connecting on Zoom. And so for the first couple of weeks, 3-4 weeks, it was really just to check in, maybe a light devotion, kind of pray for each other. But what we saw is, once people began to understand that this was not a temporary thing, that we were going to be living in this new reality in some way, shape, or form, we began to ask, okay, what can we deliver for people? What can we provide? How can we resource them? So we began thinking about content on Sunday. There's an interesting thing that happened down here in Atlanta. We had an event scheduled at a restaurant in West Midtown, which is a community we really care about on the West Side. And so we had this event scheduled in a restaurant, which is kind of something we're trying to do monthly this year. And the topic was anxiety and adulting, how anxiety affects everyday people. And so it was a perfectly timed conversation for the moment. And so what we did was we immediately transitioned it to Zoom, moved it online, invited everyone to come. We had a great turnout. We've also been in conversation with a restaurant in terms of how we can continue to support them going forward, because we knew they were getting crushed. And so we were like, how can we be in relationship and partnership, kind of build those bridges? It's been great because of that experience and the contacts we made and some of the things we were able to do. We've been in continued dialogue with the general manager of the restaurant and kind of talking about building that relationship further down the road. So, and so for us, every other week, we've tried to produce a webinar about some topic, some conversation that might be helpful, that might help people navigate what's going on. We've seen some people, honestly, who are part of our community, like, they've kind of checked out a little bit. Like, the virtual stuff is just not for them, and they've just got a lot going on. So we haven't. There are some folks that we just haven't been engaged with, but on the flip side, we have engaged with people that we hadn't seen in a while. We've engaged with new people that some of our folks have invited people to. Because I think part of what happens and what we're seeing is that there are people who are dealing with stuff. They're facing realities that are leading them to ask those bigger questions of life. And we try to be an approachable space. We believe, one of our core things is, no matter what, there's a place for you at the table. And so we try to create approachable space and conversation where, like, no matter what you've been up to, you can come in and be part of the community. So that's what we've tried to do.
I know one of the felt needs that your leadership team, you guys were trying to address pre-COVID early on, was this idea of loneliness. It's a big city, people move in, and even people that are social are can be lonely and extremely lonely. And so tell me how you guys have continued to lean into that, because obviously in quarantine and isolation, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, for
become a
sure.
huge deal.
I think one of the things you learn is that people engage it in different ways, right? That there are some people who, you know, this is really hard for, just the disconnection, and then there are other people that are just handling it maybe in a little different way. And so what we've tried to learn and lean into is everyone's going to engage this moment in their own way. And so what we've tried simply to say is, we're here for you. Whatever you need, like, you don't have to keep it from church. We tend to draw and connect in relationship with folks who maybe have had a bad church experience, and that one of their friends who's a part of our community tells them about it, and that's how they come to us. So for us, there's just a real value in, like, we're going to be in relationship with you no matter what. And so, we have a list of people where, you're going to get a weekly email from us. You're probably going to get a phone call from us once every couple of weeks. I mean, I think that's one of our big learnings in this season is, like, people just need to be cared for. And if you can figure out a way to care for them, to understand that they matter to you because they matter to God, that has really been our approach. So we've tried to be in touch, text, social, email, kind of all those things. But we've also just seen the value of a phone call, just, pretty consistently, makes a difference. And, as a church, you also have to be willing to accept that, like, they may not call you back, they may not pick up your call, but I think they know that you care about them, and that can really make an impact.
So it sounds like the most important tool that you guys have utilized, obviously pre-launch, I mean pre-virus, as part of your initial launch, but has been a godsend during this, it is your mailing list, is having
Yeah.
that database to work from.
Yeah, so we have the database, and I'm part of a larger church, and so one of the things the larger church has done is we've made an effort to call every member in the church, and so again, yeah, just to make use of that, to connect with people. What do you need? Is there any way we can help? Yeah, for us, like, just having the contact information is huge. Um, our email marketing list, our mailing list, we try to have something in people's inbox every Tuesday morning by 7 o'clock. That's kind of our day, and so we try to do that. Zoom has been huge for us, like it has a lot of churches. I mean, one of the things we've learned is about, like, how our approach, how our mission, what we really care about shapes the tools that we use. One of the things we learned in our webinar, with Zoom, you can do, like, what, people call, like, the Brady Bunch view, or, like, you could do a webinar where it's just one or two people up there. And we experimented with it both ways. And what we learned after doing the webinar was, like, that might work for other people, but that doesn't work for us, because our value, our brand, like, our mission is really about relationships. We say we're in the business of making transformational relationships with God, other people in the city of Atlanta. And so, like, when you connect around relationships, like, you need to be able to see each other. And so that shaped how we use the tools that we had at our disposal. But yeah, the email list and just the contact information has been huge. I think our next step is, what are the tools we need to give our team access to all that information? How do we share those resources where not everybody in the world can have it, but that the people who need it can have it?
So yeah, that was my last question was, how do you see as we move back into whenever it is, the ability to come out of sheltering in place and can gather in at least small groups, how, as you kind of continue your launch and building that community,
Yeah.
what tools that you've used or refined during this that you'll continue to use going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think how we are thinking about it right now, and what we like to say down here in Atlanta with the situation we're in is like no one can see more than 2 weeks down the road. So you can kind of build these plans, but things on the ground can change. For us, it feels like going forward, it's going to have to be some hybrid experience, some hybrid of digital and in person. And we know that the in person events are probably going to be smaller at the beginning. And so thinking about like things like that we have done in terms of gathering people, hopefully we'll be able to gather people at restaurants, and hopefully we'll be able to, gather people in the driveway of people's houses, 6, 10 feet apart. And but we, for us, we're really trying to learn what online worship done well could look like in a way that values relationship, that values the engagement, values the experience of the user, as opposed to, well, we're a church, so this is what we do. I think we'll continue to lean heavily into Zoom. I don't think that's going away. I mean, I think one of the things we've seen is you get higher attendance because people don't have to drive an hour to get there, or 30 minutes or whatever it is. I think there is part of what the church and everyone else is going to be learning going forward is how does the convenience factor that we've experienced while in this awful situation, how does that change our expectation? How does that change how we gather? I mean, I think that we know the church is always going to gather. We're called to gather. That's what it means. And so how do we determine what works best for our context and what works best for the people that we're trying to be in relationship with? So for us, I think it's a hybrid of digital, in person. I mean, for us, we'll continue to lean on, our database, our, MailChimp, which is our email client. I'm sure we'll continue to use Zoom, but also finding ways to gather in person when it's safe and responsible to do that.
I want to thank Daniel for sharing how their community is taking advantage of digital tools and compassion to connect with people. We want to share your ideas or address your questions about how we can connect with people in our digital culture to share the gospel and to baptize and grow disciples of Jesus Christ. Please feel free to email me at mark@churchcmo.com with your questions, ideas, or insights. We at Church CMO believe that the local church is the catalyst for change in their community and that you can change the world connecting with one person at a time. Let us know how we can help.